Tonight, a special look at media in the age of the coronavirus. These are testing times, unprecedented times, a dire global and national emergency. Is the media helping or hindering? A brilliant and experienced panel will join me. We'll look at examples, we'll debate the approaches, and we'll also discuss the implications for media companies, especially those who rely on live sport, with the AFL, AFLW, NBL, cricket and now the NRL shut down and the Olympics bound to follow. But to get a bit of an idea of just how fast news is breaking and changing these days in the media, have a look at the start of Channel 9's main Sydney bulletin tonight.
88,000 people have lost their jobs. The NRL is suspending the 2020 season. The Olympics won't go ahead this year. Queensland has closed its borders to us. 3,000 Australians are stranded on cruise ships around the world. And we can't go to the pub for a drink. If I told you 6 weeks ago this would happen, you'd think I was making it up. Well, all of these things happened in one day. Today.
Spot on, Peter Overton. It's just incredible. And we've already had a few days like that and no doubt more to go. These are just incredible times when it comes to the stories that are developing here and around the world. Now, I've long been critical of political reporting and commentary in this country. Driven by Twitter, driven by ego and driven by political bias, it's become increasingly puerile, partisan and petulant. Instead of informing the public about the issues, journalists have been keen to make smart-ass points. Instead of fostering sensible and robust debate, they've been obsessed with gotcha moments. Instead of giving the public the information it needs, they've been dedicated to impressing, not the public, but impressing other journalists. While voters are interested in serious issues like jobs, education, security and health, much of our political media has been obsessed with climate change gestures, moral posturing on borders or generosity with other people's money. One of the many points of clarity already emerging out of this historic coronavirus crisis is that it's exposed this media problem. It's shown so clearly for all of us how the journalists are still caught up in their own insider games, catching out a Prime Minister, finding a conflict, mocking someone for changing their mind. This stuff has always underestimated the public's judgment. Audiences right around the country have always deserved better, and they've always known better. That's why so many journalists have completely failed to judge elections in the past and issues such as climate and border protection. But this disaster has already underlined the point. This crisis has exposed the disconnect yet again, and now is the time it needs fixing for everyone's sake. People need information. People need communication. People have serious concerns, and the media, whose job it is to try to help provide information, to try to perform this public service of sharing communications, this media is obsessed not with providing clarity, but with providing stumbling blocks for those trying to communicate, for creating gotcha moments, for second-guessing expert opinions. In short, they're preoccupied with playing their usual games. And Scott Morrison, for one, seems to have had enough of them. See, what many journos won't realise, perhaps until too late, is what most of the public would be with ScoMo. Have a look.
Andrew. There seems to be a critical conflict here between the advice that's going to the Victorian government with regards to schools, Victoria, which has one in four students in Australia, and the advice that's coming to you. And I'd like you both to answer it. How can you explain the conflict between the advice that you're giving the nation tonight and the clear view from Victoria that schools should close from Tuesday?
Had the rise in cases not occurred.
But, Andrew, I'm sorry, you've had several questions. Andrew, I'm sorry. Andrew, I know, but you don't run the press conference, OK? So I'm going to go to other questions of members of the group. Catherine hasn't had a question. I'm happy to return to you, but let's just keep it civil.
Yeah, there are plenty of serious questions to be answered, but I think a lot of the public, as I said, would be with ScoMo there. They just want orderly focus on the issues. Now, whether they're Labor or Liberal, whether they voted for Morrison or not, they know this is the time to knuckle down and do what's necessary. Not a time for journalists to be playing gotcha games of politicking and smart-arsery. But got to tell you, these games were always a waste of time. They've just never been more unwelcome than they are now. If you're a journalist who thinks you're smart for saying the government is doing something this week it didn't do last week, or if you think it's clever to point out that different ministers in different states at different times have said different things, if you think it's a stroke of genius to say this thing will get worse before it gets better, and think for a moment there's not a politician in this country who doesn't know this. In short, if you're a journalist more intent on playing games than dealing with a national crisis, then of course you're part of the problem. So many journalists have been saying that clear communication is critical, and they've attacked various politicians for not delivering it. It's time they realise that that's their job too. Their job is not to bag the government for failing to tell people what special distancing really is. It's their job as journalists to actually explain what that is, and to interview people who can explain what it is. If journalists don't think they have a duty to actually help clear communication in a crisis, rather than muddle them up as much as possible, then they don't belong in journalism, they belong in politics rather. What they might not realise, because all their mates are on Twitter, what they might not realise is that real people in real jobs, and just tossed out of real jobs, are more interested in what's actually going on rather than in inane game playing.